I'm currently the youngest member of the House of Representatives, at 26.
I'm a fixer.
How did you fix it?
I fixed it. I come from the front, not from the back. See you next Tuesday. Is it usual for the shaft to be that long?
It's quite short.
Is it? There was something in the air that night. The stars were bright, Fernando.
I've had a fortunate life. I don't have a log cabin story like so many people in this place. Although I once did have to get my own lemon for a gin and tonic, which I'm... that may or may not qualify, Mr. Speaker.
Christopher Pyne, in Malcolm Turnbull's recent memoir, he comes to the conclusion that Scott Morrison and his supporters had to have been plotting against him, or perhaps more accurately, positioning Morrison for a potential run. Do you think that's accurate?
No, I don't. And in The Insider, I make it pretty clear that I think that is a piece of history or a theory that is being post ipso facto, if you like. It's been created after the event. I was there on the Thursday of that sitting week, what I call that week in The Insider, when Scott Morrison suggested to Malcolm Turnbull and I that we send everyone home, that after the Parliament had risen, before question time, there was no need for people to stay, and that once they'd had a couple of weeks back in their electorate, they'd realised that the last thing that the public wanted was more disunity and a change of Prime Minister. Now that wouldn't be happening from a man who was positioning himself to be the Prime Minister or had planned anything that week. That week came as a greater shock to Scott Morrison as it came to me, and in fact he on Thursday wanted to ensure that Malcolm could stay as Prime Minister into the future. So I just think that theory doesn't hold weight.
During that week, you came up with the idea of insisting that the Dutton forces deliver a petition with a majority of signatures in the party room in order to call on a second meeting. Is that actually a rule, or were you bluffing everybody, and why?
Well, Lee, it's probably a bit of both, really. The idea that just two people could demand a party room ballot whenever they felt like it was obviously not logical. So my recommendation, when I was asked my opinion as Leader of the House and a long-standing member of the party room, was, well, if the people who want to change the leader want to have a second leadership ballot in 4 days, they need to demonstrate that they have the support to do so, and the best way to do that is to require people to put their names to a petition and to get 50% plus one of the party room. And that's exactly what Malcolm required of the people who wanted to change the leadership, and the rest is history.
Did you and the other moderates in the party do over Julie Bishop in the leadership race?
Well, of course not, and I have the utmost respect for Julie Bishop, and she and I were good friends and remain good friends. Obviously, that was a bruising week and a bruising time for Julie and for me and for all of us who were involved, and for Malcolm, obviously. Truth is that I made an assessment in my walk back to my office from Malcolm Turnbull's office, which takes about 90 seconds, that if Scott Morrison was to be if Peter Dutton was not to be elected Prime Minister, which I thought was electorally not a good idea, and that meant he needed to be defeated, that either Julie Bishop or Scott Morrison were the two choices, and who was the most likely to win. And in my view, Julie Bishop would not have had enough votes in a second round to beat Peter Dutton. He would have beaten her, and then he would have been the Prime Minister, and I think we would have been defeated at the election. And my view was that Scott Morrison had enough votes of his own, independent votes, people from amongst his friendship group who'd normally be Conservatives, to vote to get elected, and that's exactly what happened. And that was very painful to have to say that to Julie Bishop. I think she would have made a very fine Prime Minister, but in that very short period of time, split-second decisions need to be made. I made one, and I conveyed that to other colleagues, and they shared my view that if Peter Dutton wasn't to be elected, Julie Bishop wasn't going to defeat him, only Scott Morrison was going to.
How do you think history will judge Tony Abbott's Prime Ministership?
Look, I think it was a bit chaotic, and I think Tony Abbott tried to do big things in a very short space of time, and I think the 2014 budget is testament to that. I think that there were some significant judgment calls which were poor ones. For example, bringing back knights and dames and then appointing the Duke of Edinburgh as a knight in the Order of Australia. I think that was poor political judgment, and I think in the end the party room was riven not by personality but by philosophy. And I think looking back, a lot of people will say that if he had granted people a conscience vote on marriage equality, which it should have been in terms of the history of the Liberal Party, as a matter of conscience, I think his prime ministership might have ended differently.
On the submarine building in South Australia, the first of them won't be ready until at least 2034. Why didn't we buy ready-made submarines from overseas, which would have been cheaper and quicker?
Because it wouldn't have made any impact at all on our economy. And as the government had decided to spend $50 billion of Australian taxpayers' money on the 12 submarines which are now called the attack class, not only do we want the military capability that will give us, which is the first priority, but it was an opportunity to remake our strategic industrial base and to replace the automotive industry and all those high-end science, technology, engineering and maths jobs. So there needed to be more than just the national security impact of the submarines, the economic impact of spending $50 billion on the largest industrial project in Australia was far too good an opportunity to pass up.
You've faced some media attention since you've left office about your lobbying work. What do you say to the suggestion that politicians should be banned from lobbying for firms relating to portfolios that they once held in government?
Well, look, the rules are the rules, Lee, and I've abided by the rules. And there was a Senate inquiry into this which found that I had done absolutely nothing wrong at all. I have done precisely what the Ministerial Code of Conduct requires, and I'm a person of good common sense, so I'm not going to do anything to damage either my reputation or the reputation of anybody with whom I'm working. So if they change the rules, good luck to them.
You left politics without ever being involved in a scandal, without losing your seat, your pre-selection or your reputation. Every member of Parliament, bar one, came to hear your farewell speech, and your marriage is intact. In politics, that implies either a Christ-like miracle or a Tony Soprano-esque level of ruthless fight to the death survival. Which is it in your case?
Look, I think it's a combination of many factors, and both of those included. I don't think anybody believed, Lee, that I was a soft touch in politics. If you came after me, you got as good as you got, and maybe more. I have a fantastic partner who has kept the whole show on the road at home for 25 plus years, and 4 very respectful, wise and patient children. But I think a lot of it goes back to seeing politics as a vocation, not taking yourself too seriously, keeping the personal separate from the political, and trying to keep front and centre that what you're trying to do is change Australia for the better. And once you feel like you've had as much as you can do of that, it's time to let somebody else have a go. And that's what I decided after a quarter of a century, that I thought at 51, if I was going to have a third career, if you can call my legal career a career, which lasted 2 years, it was time to do it. That's what I've done.
Christopher Pyne, it's been good to have you back on the program. Thank you.
It's nice to be back, Lee. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.